We are in conversation with Mr. Umang Vohra from Cipla to take us through the deal for Invagen, which they've just closed. Thanks a lot, Umang, for speaking with CNBC TV 18. I begin by asking you about the deal closure. You have earlier stated that the deal would be EPS accretive from day one. What sort of products in pipeline that you're banking on to say that it would be EPS accretive, and what sort of margins would you be working forward?
So, we are very happy that we finally closed the deal. I think it's been going on for a while, but tremendously happy to see it close just yesterday night and today morning. The business as it stands today is EPS accretive by itself. So it's got a top line of about 230 million. We sell about 30 odd products. Most of these products are in categories where we don't expect too much competition, and therefore we don't see too much of risk in this baseline going forward. So as it stands today, this business of 230 million is already EPS accretive. The pipeline for the future has another 30 odd products, almost 5 of which are, we believe, first to file opportunities and will be great accretion to the overall business. And therefore, I think that the EPS accretive nature is that it's already reached a critical size in the US, where it is all making a fairly, I would say, decent EBITDA. And on top of that, it has a pipeline which can come in and substitute to make sure that the product pipeline keeps growing.
Mm-hmm. So what sort of margins that you would be working forward with this deal coming in?
So we don't give sector-specific margins. But if you're signaling that the deal is going to be EPS accretive and EBITDA accretive, it's obviously at a margin profile which is better than either the same or better than Cipla's current margin profile. So we're not going to signal specific segment EBITDA margins, etc. So all I can say is it's at the same trajectory or better than the Cipla current EBITDA profile.
Mm-hmm. Does it change some bit of your guidance going forward that you've already provided for?
Not for this year, because this year really, between the time we close to the time the year ends, it's realistically only about a month or so. So nothing significant for this year. And our guidance anyway did not include the acquisition. Starting next year, once we close our budgets, there will be a new guidance given, which will now include the acquisition of these two companies.
If I can delve a little deeper into, what sort of products would you be launching in the market in the US through Invagen? The ones which are already in the market and the ones in the pipeline. What sort of market share are you working with? Which would be the key products that you would be banking on?
So there is some out of the publicly available pipeline for Invagen, and I think that publicly available pipeline has some products like Renleva, right, and categories such as that. We don't want to get too much into product specifics. All I would say is that it has a list of products. We should be launching about 10 products the next year, which is the year FY17. Maybe 5 to 6 of those 10 are products where we don't expect too much competition when we launch, right? And therefore, I think that for us, that is definitely margin accretive as we look at the pipeline. The ones that we sell currently, the largest selling products are Raloxifene, Gabapentin, right, Sertraline. So these are product categories where a fair number of people have already entered. So we don't expect too much of competition in most of these product categories.
There has been a 483 in one of the facilities that you've acquired through Invagen. What is the status right now, and could it lead to some amount of concerns, because we've seen most of these 483s leading into warning letters? So what level of 483s are we dealing with?
So, we've signaled through our process that the 483s for Invagen we've reviewed them during our diligence process. And, I think based on what and how they've replied to the FDA, we don't see them as big concerns for Cipla right now. So we're actually happy with the way that the response has gone out. It does have to officially wait for an FDA EIR, but we think that there doesn't seem to be an issue with the 483s on the ground there. The observations are more procedural and less indicative of a deeper issue within the operations.
When I'm talking of the 483s and USFDA audit, one of your key facilities here in India has also received a 483. Wanted to get an update. Is there an OAI status also accorded to, along with the 483 by the USFDA for the Indore plant?
Not as yet. There is no official action indicated status as yet. We are working with the FDA. There are regular updates that we provide. So there's nothing about nothing that leads us to believe today that we are in that status. Production continues at the site, and there is regular correspondence with the FDA.
Also wanted to get a sense of what sort of products have you filed out of Indore, and what sort of an impact do you anticipate in case there is some more time before the resolution at that plant?
So not many products from Indore, let me put it that way. I think there is an equal mix of products that we filed out of our facilities in Goa, Indore, and everywhere else. So there's nothing super critical that is pending to come from Indore. Having said that, in our list of launches of 10 or 15 products that Cipla hopes to launch in the US in the next year, there could be 2 or 3 from Indore as well, right? But the Indore facility, just so that you're aware, has 4 or 5 types of operations. It's got an operation around tableting, regular tablets that you buy. It's got an operation in nasal sprays. It's got an operation in sterile injectables, right? And if you were to put all of these together, the observations are specific to one particular area in Indore and not all across. So even though Indore has 2 or 3 launches from the list of launches for next year, those aren't specifically launches that are that have been pointed out as observations from the 483.
Talking of the US market, where Indore would have contributed and Invagen would now contribute, in the next 1 or 2 years time frame, what sort of a critical mass do you think Cipla could build, both from the organic way as well as contributing through Invagen?
So Cipla with Invagen and the acquisition of Exelon, both put together, Cipla's revenues next year in the US, between what we sell directly and what we sell through partners, could well be in the range of about, I would say, close to 400, just shy of 400 or close to thereabouts, right? $400 million. So now that's not small, considering where Cipla was maybe 2 years or a year back. We think that the pathway, I think where Cipla is advantaged compared to some of the other Indian players, is that most of these players have now reached billion plus revenue. You look, our peer set is largely around that level. And if you were to plot the scale up, and by no means is it easy to scale from a 400 million to $1 billion, because there are several capabilities required in the organization. But I think if we were to execute that well, the runway for growth in the US is possibly very much more attractive than some of the other markets that we operate in. And so therefore there will be a lot of focus in Cipla to build the US from this 400 million to close to, we've signaled that we'd like it to be upwards of 25% of our revenue. So as Cipla is growing, the US will grow disproportionately fast. And frankly, in the US, maybe 3 years or 4 years later, there are going to be products in categories such as the respiratory category, and some of the other oncology indications, and HIV, which Cipla historically has been advantaged to play in as a category. So if you look at respiratory, Cipla's probably in India almost 70+% share in that market. So we have the basic technology and the knowledge of that area, and we're hoping to leverage that in the US for some of these products as they go off patent. So if we realistically look at what's going off patent in the US, it's really the respiratory products, it's the products in HIV, and it's the products in oncology, right? And I think all 3 are areas where Cipla can play. So the US pipeline is going to be a derivative of that. And I think we feel good about the ability to build this business from $400 million or so. I will also signal one more thing, and that is most companies, when you have the size and the heft of the US market, will begin to try and focus and execute there. And as a result of that, there will be actions taken to simplify Cipla's current business model, right? Because it's always easy to say, I'm going to do this much more. But realistically, we are all human beings, and therefore, if we were to focus, there will be few areas that we can focus in. And so I do think that there will also be a signal where we're simplifying our footprint, simplifying our SKUs, even for the rest of the world markets, and choosing to play in markets where Cipla is historically advantaged, either because of its portfolio or because of its legacy.
Would that mean more of acquisitions?
No, I don't think it would mean more of acquisitions. Acquisitions would keep, they would keep coming now and then, depending on the opportunity. But it would mean that if, for example, we operate in 130 countries, but fundamentally we feel that value comes out of, that we'd like to grow, let's say, 80 of them, I mean, as a number, right? Then we'd like to focus on those 80 more than the other 50 that are around, right? And I think as a result of doing this US deal, it's absolutely imperative that we pick and choose what we want to do, as against just keep adding on to the current base of Cipla. So there will be a simplification of our model, business model. There will be a simplification of our portfolio. And all of that is going to be because we want to drive focus growth in deeper markets.
Just a follow-up question on the US market. Exelon Pharma, the deal which would also be closing today, would be focusing more on the hospitals business as well as the tenders in the government business, and that was the focus when you took on Exelon. With the recent change now in the US that the API has to be sourced locally, do you think there is going to be some sort of an impact? How much of API for Exelon actually comes from outside, and what would be the impact?
So API for Exelon is generally from. So let me step back and say that there has been, as far as we're concerned, and from our knowledge of this market, there is actually no change in the legislation. The US has always insisted that substantive transformation of the products that are supplied to the government and the veterans business happen in the US. So substantive transformation must happen in the US. There's no change to that. And Exelon, has complied with that requirement to have substantive transformation happening in the US for its product categories. And, the API for Exelon, depending on the type of product, comes from, it comes from markets outside of India, and it comes from markets which are, I would say, TAA compliant. And that's the legislation in the US, that you've got to be compliant for substantive transformation.
Coming to the UK market, and very closely watched out for is the launch of Seretide in the UK. Where are we getting stuck as far as the approvals are concerned? Almost 1.5 years ago, the company had given a guidance that it would be about 18 months time frame when you would start launching the product. Where are we getting stuck?
So we are delayed, right? I don't want to give a message that we believe that we're still on time from what we told you earlier. We're delayed. We have reasonable hope. B, there's a lot of dialogue with the agency on this, specifically with the UK agency now. Do we see anything in that dialogue that begins to worry us about whether we'd reach the finish line? No. Right? Is there more work to be done? Yes, absolutely. What gives us the confidence is the fact that in all the other markets, we're beginning to see approval for this, right? Even in the Western European markets, right? So I think this dialogue is important for us to close with the agency in the UK. And frankly, we feel more confident about closing it now. I can't give you a timeline because I can't predict what would be further questions that the agency would have. All I can say is we believe that by closing out some of the points that the agency's asked, that we would get to the finish line. And our approval in some of the other Western European markets, and from what we've seen from the agency's draft of questions to ask, we're not worried about getting past the finish line, but we are delayed.
What really have been the concerns raised by the regulator, or what have been the points that have been discussed that have taken so long for it to get?
So most of the questions around the respiratory area in general, by all regulators, not just the regulator in the UK, and I don't want to be specific to that, are around just the ability of the company to characterize the product, right? To make sure that the product behaves in exactly the same way in a patient or a human's lung as the innovator product would, right? And all the questions are around that, right? Now, in some cases, and in most cases, there is a dialogue that happens. In the UK, I think we have been surprised with why this has taken so long ourselves. Let me be honest about it. But I think our approvals in other European markets clearly signal to us that we are on the right track here. So, I can't be more specific about what specific queries, etc., because we're still in dialogue with the agency. But all I can say is there's very high confidence that we're going to close the finishing line Can I give you a timeline? I would love to, but I don't want to give you a timeline and then explain why we didn't hit it. So hopefully, the way it's going, I'm sure that in 3 to 4 quarters we should be able to cross the finish timeline there.
3 to 4 quarters, which means at least a year more for you to...
For the UK. For the approval, the rest of the markets would be there. Now I said within, right? So it could happen next quarter. It could happen in the next 15 days. It could happen 3 quarters later.
Okay, perfect. But, considering you agree that you've got delayed by 1.5 years, which means all the strategies that you would have worked for in terms of market launch, in terms of competition, are all dated now, and you would have to work on your strategies. What sort of changes are you looking at? Competition is building up in that market with Mylan entering already. How do you see the market now? And what sort of opportunities are you working? Are you changing the calculations that you had done?
So, I have a different view of thought in this. And I think the thought is, it's great to be first. But this is not a category where where we expect more than 4 or 5 players. I'll be honest, right? And as long as the competition profile is that there is a Mylan or a Sando or somebody else launching, who are companies which are 3 times or 4 times our size, right? And we're still in the play there. These are big markets, right? This is not a small market to be in the UK. We still feel very good about it. And I don't think there's a change that we need to do, because the UK model that we had envisaged was never going to be too extensive in the front end to promote this product. Right, so we have thought of our model to be a little similar to the US, and therefore there's no change to our strategy. Right, it's a delay in the time that we monetize the opportunity. And frankly, if we had signaled we would be first, we are not going to be first, and so therefore what we may make may be lesser. But even if we make that lesser amount, it's a huge opportunity for Cipla.
Overall, going forward, US and UK, let's say in the next 1 year time frame, if the inhaler doesn't come in, what sort of market revenue visibility are you talking about?
So the US anyway doesn't have too much of the inhaler in the next 1 year or 2 years. The general inhaler products and the respiratory products for the US come in maybe 3 years or 4 years later. The UK, frankly, as I said, we're looking at 3 to 4 quarters out. Opportunity is big for us. I can't give you a size. Most analysts have figured out that if we were to be in the market, we would have a business of a substantial size. But I think both of these are very attractive for us still today, and both of them are independent business cases. The UK for us would be an as attractive independent case, and the US in its own area would be an attractive business case. So we're still excited about the opportunity. I do want to also speak about one more thing. As we do more and more products in respiratory, this is in some form organizational learning as well, right? How we deal, because these are by far one of the most set of complex products that people would launch in these markets. And so I think there's tremendous learning that we're gaining. This is not a learning which is a plug-and-play learning, which means if I have this learning in an oral solid product, I can't plug and play that learning in the respiratory scheme of things, right? And therefore, I think, I just signaled 2 or 3 things. We're worthy competitors. If there's a Mylan or a Sandoz who've launched to a 4 times our size and have been in generics longer than we have, it's fine. We should have been earlier. We're not. We feel really confident that we're going to cross the finish line, more confident now than ever, and it's been great learning going this way.
All right, just as a last question, would there be any funding requirements now that Cipla would need to go into, and any more acquisitions that you are out in the market?
We will be funding. I think Cipla, because of the acquisition in the US, would be taking debt on its books. And if the right opportunity comes, we would. Today we are not levered very significantly, so our risk profile is definitely not over the top. And for the right opportunity, we could borrow.
But would it be only borrowings, or would you look at some equity raisings?
I think we're going to go. The borrowing market is attractive and fairly attractive even today. You've seen interest rates are rock bottom. I think we would probably go down the borrowing route, right? But not we don't plan for this well in advance. So, for example, we're not going to plan an equity infusion on the back of acquisitions that could unfold in the future. I don't think we go down that route.
All right, Umang, thanks a lot for speaking with CNBC TV 18. Thanks for your time. Thanks.